Morning, Laura. Morning, everyone.
Good morning, and good morning to Spook.
Howdy, Wally.
Greetings, Dean. Nice to see you up and awake, and you've got another session this afternoon.
It's a busy day for me. I'm just learning to cope with fame.
I thought we'll have him here first, and then SAIA later.
Looking forward.
Morning, Dean. Morning, Skura. How's it going?
Morning, Cameron.
How's it, Cameron?
Looking forward to this one, Dean.
You're hoping you're going to be mentioned in dispatches, Cam?
I hope I'm not mentioned, actually.
Cameron, late as usual, huh?
I've been waiting for Skura to let me in. I've been like,
yeah, same story. Hasn't changed.
How's it, Mark?
How's it, Dean? How you doing?
Just all my ex-staff, the 10 Rand I promised you to attend this morning, you can only collect next month, eh? Because cash flow's problematic at the moment.
Nothing's changed.
checks in the mail.
Morning, everybody.
Morning, Miguel Adima.
Morning, Miguel. Morning, Adima. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Today we have Dean J joining us. He's going to be talking about the recent competition that he's won. So the past few practice breakfasts, as Dean has pointed out, a number of guys have passed through his office. So it's always great to have that in our community of architects, where it's like, you know, it's like a family. So many senior architects here who have mentored us who have been carving up. Well, we're not really young anymore, but so Dean has been practicing for about 30 years now. His practice has won many awards. We know him for his attention to detail. I was just telling him now that the first time I heard of his name was his house that he built with the roof opening in the living area, which I thought that was actually quite special. So today he's gonna talk to us through the War Graves Memorial competition that he's won recently. So Dean, thank you for joining. Thank you for making time. Over to you, please.
Thanks, Skura. Janet, excuse me. Janet is assisting me with this because, as those of you that know me, I can't operate any electronic devices. Is that on? Is that screen share? Can everyone see a chicken?
Yeah, we see it.
Yes, we can, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so morning everyone. Thanks Skura and KZN for asking me to share our experience with you on this competition victory. Just in terms of the name of this presentation, those of you that have worked for the practice or know me know that we have all little funny expressions and sayings in the office. And when Janet was preparing the slides, Kim was giving her was asking her what the name of the presentation was. So whilst I was busy and irritable, I just said winner chicken dinner, and it somehow stuck. So that's how we got to the title. I'm pleased to hear from time to time the phrases that we developed and used in our practice are coming in ever common usage in architecture. Okay, so I thought just to extend the talk a little bit, because the presentation on our scheme is quite brief because it's very simple. We would explain a little bit the journey and how we got to do the competition. We were working on a fantastic project called Homestead. It's a game lodge in Nambiti Game Reserve near Ladysmith. It really, when we sort of got going, the client asked us to do a concept proposal before appointing us. I did make him pay for the concept proposal, of course. And he accepted the concept as it was done, which was a fantastic opportunity for us. As I near the end of my career, I was sort of looking for my magnum opus, a sort of project that would define my work in some kind of way that hadn't been buggered up by the client or the contractor. So there are two parts of the contract, the project. The one was the lodge itself, and the other was the support village. The support village was actually, from a cost point of view, was actually a bigger project than the lodge itself. So we started these projects, I think, just after COVID, or no, during COVID. That's right. So that was pretty challenging. During the initial year or so of the projects, we actually turned down other work because we were so busy with this, and managing work during COVID was very, very challenging. So the lodge itself was, we pretty much finished, and well, let me show the next slide. So this is the lodge from the air. It's a simple linear building that connects. Can you point there? Okay. Thanks. It connects a lake or dam on one side and the escarpment with tremendous views of the reserve on the other, with the main lodge building and then individual rooms on the edge of the escarpment. Basically, it turned out, it's not finished, but our scope was finished on it, and then the cushion scatterers and the client were, and their IT team were working on the lodge. So we moved on from this to phase 2, which was the support village. Just click next slide. Here's some more of the lodge. Those are the units on the edge of the escarpment. Those are some other units. And we started focusing on Elandslaagte. This is Elandslaagte, the support village. The concept that we sold to the client was of Bourneville. Where's Bourneville? Near Birmingham. Can anyone confirm? Frank, you'll know stuff like that. Where's Bourneville? It's the Cadbury support. Cadbury was the owner of, obviously, the chocolate factory, and he was a philanthropist, and he was quite novel. And he said that he built a tremendous facilities for his staff in order that he could attract the best staff to get the best outcome. I've always adopted that attitude in my practice. I've treated my staff really well so that I get the best staff. Isn't that true, everyone? So just to explain quickly, if we can just point, it's Birmingham, thought so. So there was a sort of a support facility where Janet is indicating that had laundries and vehicle workshops and all that kind of thing. There was single staff quarters with a pool, a clinic, a nursery, offices, and a town square, and then married staff, and then a football field and a sporting facility. So I'll just show you what it would look like. These, I think, are the single quarters. Okay, next. And their pool and the dam. And then suddenly the project stopped. Oops, Janet's getting over enthusiastic, sorry. So we were faced with a real dilemma that we had been working furiously on a project that was quite fast track and needed urgently and had to open. And then the client, the payments to us and to other people started slowing down and stopping altogether. I'm sure it's not a completely novel experience for all of you. Or maybe it's just me. And effectively, there was no connection between what the client's desires were and his financial capabilities. So the whole project, both the lodge and the support village only half got started. The service facility got started. As I said, the main building of the lodge was finished, but various different interior designers and other clever people were busy destroying my dream. And then the money stopped and the project stopped. And there was a huge hole in the practice. So it was quite devastating for me personally, because I loved the lodge building. And there's a fair degree of certainty in my mind, even though the project is continuing without our involvement. There's no actual work on site. There are court cases and lawsuits and all kinds of things, which currently we're not involved in. And I don't anticipate being involved in, but anything's possible. And I was quite devastated, because I'm not going to get a lot. I felt at the time we weren't going to get a lot of opportunities to do some really good architectural work, where it's my feeling of our practice with all the creative people that have been staff at the office. We have done some good work, but without being, I'm not, what's the word? I'm not falsely modest or modest at all. In fact, any of those words don't apply to me. But I do feel our work was a lot of our work was close but no cigar. It wasn't quite good enough. And I had hoped this project would lift us to the next level. So it was pretty devastating. Apart from the financial, problems, and I had employed staff to do the work, and then we didn't have the work. Clients that I turned down during doing the lodge, they get if you turn clients down, they get very grumpy and they don't like you anymore. So we were left with a big hole, and we thought, what can we do? And I got Tino and the guys looking at finding competitions on the internet that we could do. We don't ordinarily do competitions, but we found this competition. I presume they can't see that thing. Okay, so I'm just getting help from our technical division. So we found this competition. I can't read it now. It was organized by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, which is as I found out subsequently, a surprisingly huge organization in the UK, charged with creating memorials for war victims of any Commonwealth wars. This was specifically to honor Black South Africans lost in the First World War, which most people, including myself, may not have been aware that there even were Black soldiers fighting in the First World War. And it was particularly well organized, the competition, in as much as the Cape Institute had set it up. I believe that SAIA, there's some irony on my talk this afternoon for SAIA, and that I believe SAIA weren't comfortable with how the competition was set up and the terms of the competition. So the Cape Institute and some local architects set up the competition very thoroughly. So it's always great if you do a competition where the brief is clear, it's been well researched, it's kind of, yeah, you've just got meat to work with, because obviously in a competition, you are removed of the ability to engage with the client and iterate with them on what their needs and desires are. So it appealed. We kind of thought that, again, also the nature of it, we felt that we'd be competing against some pretty big guns in the architectural world. And it was a bit of a punt. But nonetheless, we took it on. Storing. Sorry, Houston, we have a problem. Oh, now we're going backwards.
Moving.
Sorry, don't panic, Janet. It's panicking. Okay, so a little bit more about the competition. Just for the, I mean, I presume most of you know the basics, but I'd have nothing to talk about it if I didn't go through it again. It had been arranged with the City of Cape Town for the memorial to be situated in the company gardens, which if you've been to Cape Town in the CBD, you can't really miss it. It's those bushy things in the big red rectangle that you can see. And more specifically, a quadrant of the gardens had been selected, which is referred to as the Delville Wood quadrant. The Battle of Delville Wood was a big battle in the first, and the memorial was created by Sir Herbert Baker. So obviously, if you won this competition, you would be, you know, amongst the sort of glorious architects of the past. And particularly for me, becoming a glorious architect of the past was something I was quite keen on. So that's the point. It was very specifically, the site was very, very specifically, even more narrowly than this. You had a height restriction, you had a site restriction, you had to work in a very specific constrained rectangle, for want of a better thing. Okay, next. This is actually the site. I find the picture particularly appealing, the photograph, as it shows the reality of the site. It's used by members of the public. There are a lot of people that sleep in the park, even though they're not supposed to. So whatever you, and it's a very, very simple space. It's not cluttered. The layout of the park is completely orthogonal and classical. The photograph on the left is a view from the Delville Wood Memorial towards the actual quadrant that you were allowed to work in. The middle photograph looks from the other side towards the Delville Wood Memorial. And then the photograph on the right-hand side, there is a raised platform or raised element that was part of the competition site, but it was about 1.5 meters higher than the rest of the site and formed an edge to an access road. And part of the brief was that you had to deal with disabled access from this higher section of the company gardens into the lower section. So then again, I'm on the presumption that not everybody has seen the competition entries or you know, obviously anyone who entered would have seen them, but I thought I'd just show a few because there was some remarkable sort of closeness to what we did and yet completely different. Please, if you are watching and you did enter and I haven't selected your design, don't be angry with me. Janet picked them, I'll blame her. So this is Earth World, and it was, you can see what it is, how they approached it. Alex Stewart and Pot, these, by the way, that have been selected were all in the 9 runners up or whatever. So there's a lot of poll stuff going on, but also with a lot of other things included if you can bear in mind or hold in mind the pictures of the site that we showed you previously, and then consider these interventions. Next. I'm not sure who, I don't know how to pronounce that name. I'm not sure who this guy is. Joke. Joe Nero. So there was some hectic competition. Not that the other people weren't good. Okay, carry on. And who's that lot? This looks quite nice, this design here. So Dyson Simple, Design Workshop. and 24/7. You can see all the approaches. Some are more, how shall I put it, understated, and some are more dramatic. Carry on. So for us, in a sense, and again, I must stress, those of you that know me know that modesty is not one of my weaknesses. But as a practice, I think we've got a good reputation, but we're not certainly currently one of the design heroes. So there was a feeling a little bit that if we entered, I mean, as it turns out, I think there were over 60 entries and from some very eminent practices. We did feel a little bit like David and Goliath, but we were game to give it a bash. This image here is from All Quiet on the Western Front. I believe it's a Netflix show, and then I believe it's also a movie now, which is winning all kinds of awards as we speak. But for those of you that can still read, it's a book that is well worth reading. I have very strong feelings on war, and All Quiet on the Western Front is probably one of the most realistic war books ever written. I can't speak for the movie because I haven't seen it. But this image we found online, and I thought it was quite funny and quite good, even though there's not a lot to laugh about in war. So there's the big guy and the small guy, that's us fighting the big guy, but the big guy didn't realize we had a gun. Okay, next. So our entry, I mean, I've heard talks about, and I'm engaged sometimes at Bloemfontein University, and there's a lot of conversation about architectural theory and this and that, and I'm sure there's a lot of merit to it. My understanding of architecture has really always been quite simple. I think a concept that somehow fully understands both what the site is and the purpose of the building is, and then that well implemented is what architecture is. So I've always felt that architecture is quite simple, really. And the imagery of this graveyard, it's a Normandy American cemetery. Where is it? Somewhere in Europe. I mean, that's the iconography that we all associate graveyards with. There's kind of that. And then there's the Vietnam Memorial as a current thing. And if you look at the previous competition entries that we showed you, there's like some went more Vietnam War Memorial and some went, well, nobody went quite like this, but some went a kind of hybrid of it. And bear in mind, this is a grave, ours is a memorial. The difference is that the remains are not on site, as our client has pointed out to us repeatedly. The distinction is an important one to make. So that was the iconography of the concept. Next. Ooh. So I'm not going to read this out to you. I'm going to give you a minute or so to read this thing. I'll get all emotional if I read it. We found this in, I think, on the Commonwealth War Graves website. But it's a diary of the recollections of a mother whose husband had been killed in the First World War. And the sort of emotional, I guess it's a need for closure, these cliches that people have that for when people have died, which I think exists within and without of war. But I think particularly the sentiment exists in war because it's so unnecessary and meaningless and whatever, that those who remain, to have a marker or something that recognized their existence on Earth is important. And a thing that came from this, that rather than go for the kind of Vietnam memorial approach where there's a wall with a name, we felt that rather, and it was very much the office vote, that an individual marker for each victim of the war was the more appropriate approach. Again, just to reestablish some other criteria that we felt or made important, we felt it should be a memorial that you pass through instead of a memorial that you look at. We acknowledged that a super sensitive site that we would have to reconcile colonial architecture with African without the derogation of either. So that's the trickiest bit about it, I think. We thought we would kind of Africanize the memorial through choice of materials and differentiated iconography as best we can. And I strongly consider myself an African, by the way, if anyone's interested. We had to allow accessibility between the upper and lower platforms. That's fairly functional, but it was a primer to the outcome thing. And then consideration for desire paths and the way people move through gardens. Can you help me, Janet? At different Google images, there are different desire paths that ignore the colonial tradition and move at an angle across the squares. And at different Google images, there's one across our path in that direction. So those were the simple primers. And that led to our scheme. So this is our scheme. If you think there's not much to it, then I agree with you. That's what, as I'll read later on from the jury report, why we think we won. You can see the linking desire path is highlighted in the existing material of the park, so that whilst it's obviously different in an intervention, it harmonizes through material. Each victim has a pole or marker with their name on it. There is an access route through from that lower road that looks towards the Delville Memorial, which is where I'm sitting now. I'm not actually on the Delville Memorial, but you know what I mean. It's just very, very simple. The poles were organized in a way that, because of the spacing, that the density of the intervention changed as you walked from down one route or another. You will perceive a greatly varying density of the intervention. I think it's the video now. So we did a little fly through. We now have those facilities. Can they hear me? Okay, so just play it and we'll, sorry, we didn't design those park benches, by the way, those are already there.
What are the elements made of, Dean? These vertical elements.
Skira, the posts I'm going to show you now in a moment. So we are at the stage of the process that we're waiting for final heritage approval. And we are sampling the posts as a fundamental thing. I'll touch on that in a moment. Okay, next. So they timber of, sorry, I mean, simply put, they are timber. But there's more to that than meets the eye. So each person's name is etched onto the post, and you can find out where your ancestor is. If you go to the, can you show? I mean, I think just go to the next slide, and I'll. So can you point out, Janet? So if you look at 03, that this is a plan, by the way, for those of you. I always remember some staff members would jokingly ask, I'd draw something and they'd ask me if it's a plan or a section. So 03 is the kind of memorial podium where through QR codes you can find out which row your ancestor is in. As it turns out, they are tracing as a parallel process ancestors of these black soldiers who were primarily laborers. They were part of the labor corps, and most of them died in Africa, in Kenya in particular. And they've only found 8, but they've only just started that process of finding ancestors and relatives of the victims. So but I think for scholars and other people, it will be of interest to go and find out, and there will be more on the memorial podium that will explain where the soldiers were from, what they did, and so on and so forth. There's a, what is it, a RT division working on all of that stuff. So quite simply, you can see in plan, the link, the kind of defies or breaks the orthogonal. Have you got a mouse? Of the sort of planted quadrant, and then an access from the lower section that links through to, visually links through, and looks straight at the Delville Wood Memorial, which is just off the picture. We had in the composition design, I wish somebody could tell me a sort of impressive name for a water feature, but we had a water element on the edge that was not so much as it was a design element, but it was because we didn't want a balustrade there, and it was to try and deal with keeping people away from the edge because it was over 1 meter and complying with code. That has, in the actual implemented design, that's disappeared. Anybody who had water in their scheme was on a hiding to nothing. If you go to the site, a lot of the water features have been closed up because for maintenance concerns. But we had contemplation spaces where people could sit, and it really is our hope that members of the public, whether having any personal involvement with these victims, will enjoy and be able to sit in the space, enjoy looking at it, enjoy walking through it, and enjoy the experience, and that it will in some way atone for the senseless loss of these people's lives through war, whatever it was that they were doing in the war, because war is just about as stupid a thing as man does that he can do. And unfortunately, it's mainly men that do this war thing. I don't think there's anything else I need to say about that. This now is a sectional elevation, for those of you that have forgotten. Again, it doesn't look like much, but we think that's a good thing. And to answer Skura's question, these are the poles as designed. There is a stainless steel core, a timber outer, a granite block, a rough granite block, which is similar to the curbstones in the area, and a precast concrete foundation. We obviously knew that the sort of longevity and strength of this would be a fundamental part of our scope of works. So whilst this was a design intent proposal, We are currently in our engineer's garden sampling, and whilst we're waiting for the heritage process, we are making poles, because as you know, engineers all over design everything. So and I'm a closet engineer, so we rather make them and then pull them. You can see a crack here on one of the columns, and we're fighting the challenge now. We want these to be quite slender, and yet we need the balance of durability that they're not going to break either through abuse or any other cause, because it does get cold in Cape Town and the need for firewood is quite high, we believe. So we're sorting that out, and it's going relatively well, but we haven't yet finalized the actual detail of how the posts work. So in closing, I think what Sir David Ajay said, and having now seen not all of the other schemes, but some of the other schemes, what his competition comment says it better than I could say it. I'm not going to read this out to you. I was quite touched, but I think the key thing that we managed to achieve that perhaps some of the others didn't is the light touch with a high impact. So of all the schemes, I think ours most lightly touched the nature of the park and the gardens and all the other work, and yet it will clearly be impactful when you see it, but it doesn't actually change what's already there. Sorry, I'm just having my hair done. What's wrong?
It moved, yes.
Okay, when I hit the floor.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I was getting excited, everyone. I hope everyone's still. Thank you. Our makeup team is finished now. Okay, next. So again, I apologize to my ex-members of staff who've all heard this before. I think really simple, the hardest thing in architecture is to remember, in my opinion, and you may not all agree with me, that less is more. I certainly think it's appropriate in this case, and I think it's why we won. The quote is attributed to Mies van der Rohe, as you know, but it's actually from Robert Browning. And in the same poem is my favorite, later on in one of the other stanzas is my favorite saying, but a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for?
The champions, my friends.
That's it. Okay, that's it. Question time.
Thank you, Jean. I think you make me think of what the new SAIA president Amira Osman said in a speech recently, that a decision to build is architectural, as well as a decision not to build is also architectural. So the words by Sir David Ajay there communicates exactly that it's a very light impact, but very light intervention, but I mean the impact is great. So thank you for that, and congratulations. I do think that the firms and practices that were involved there, I mean, all those big names, people who win the competitions, I mean, Awero, design workshop, etc. So that's really great. Well done, Dean.
Thank you. It was particularly nice beating design workshop.
So now tell me, Dean, apart from the process of the heritage approval, the project is definitely going ahead. It will be implemented, right?
Yes, yeah, if all goes well, we hope by December. So we're pushing everybody. Our submission drawings are complete. So immediately the heritage process is through. We will then submit to LUMS, or land use management. I mean, it's raised interesting things, because in terms of SANS 10400, you obviously have to submit buildings to LUMS, or to, sorry, LUMS is the Cape Town thing. Yeah. But I mean, is it a building is the question as well. But anyway, we know we have to jump through those hoops. We think, though there are problems with delays and everything in Cape Town in approvals. Oh, look, there's Nina Saunders. I think she might be able to help us. We have sort of connections at the highest level that have bought into the project, because it is a project that deals with kind of redressing of past imbalances and so on. So we anticipate getting through those processes quite relatively quickly. And then we'll be ready to start and build. And again, because of the nature of the design, a lot of the stuff can be prefabricated. So we're hoping for Christmas to be complete, but that may not happen. There are many hurdles to jump through, but it will happen. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Okay, lovely. Thanks, colleagues. I'll open the floor for comments and questions. Another interesting thing, Dean, I don't know if you've noticed, were there landscape architects who entered the competition, or were they just architects who entered?
I
Your
think
knowledge.
I think one or two landscape firms did enter. I'm just looking around. Do you guys know? I don't know. No, we can't say. I think there were some landscape. I haven't actually ever seen a list of all 60 odd entries. So I've only seen the 9 runners up and ourselves, but I think there were some landscape architects that entered.
Interesting, because it's really just landscaping at the end of the day, if you like.
Skiro, what are you trying to say about our work? You know,
in a nice way, in a nice way. Are there any questions or comments, colleagues?
Somebody needs to ask something, otherwise you don't get your full 0.1 CPD point.
Hi, Dean. It's Mike Bull here.
Howdy, Mike.
Just yeah, that's great. Very, very interesting. And I just wondered whether in your research and looking at precedent and that you ventured into Freedom Park in Pretoria, because Iskimbutu, which is the memorial for all the persons who died in the freedom struggle, is an extraordinary example of architecture. And but I don't think many people have actually seen it. The access to Freedom Park is so difficult. Did you get to see it? I'm just interested, because I don't think many people have.
Mark,
and it was completed. It was completed about 2007, 2008. So it's been around a few years.
Mark, very interesting question, because what's so funny about that is that the last competition this practice did was that Freedom Park competition. So obviously we didn't win that one, but that was literally the last time we did a competition. So I think I was so crushed by not winning, I vowed never to enter another competition. So I'm very familiar with it from pictures, and but I've never been there myself.
Yeah.
And it does look like it's worth a visit from what I've seen. Yeah, I'm familiar with it, because, as I say, I mean, that was 20 odd years ago, that competition.
Yeah, that's right, and that's what Jeremy Rose and Mashabani Rose and Mpeti Morageli and Gap, and those were the team that we worked with. And it's an extraordinary place. You know, what you're talking about is a place, and this is what this is. It's just such a shame that there hasn't been more. No, I'm glad you're aware of it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Talking about competitions, Dean, I do feel that they kind of level the field or give architects a stepping stone into opportunities of designing something quite significant. I mean, even up and coming firms. I mean, your firm has been around for 3 decades, so it's not really a young firm. What do you think of competitions? I mean, going forward, I know that it's not really easy to deal with treasury as far as procurement is concerned. We had this talk yesterday from education in terms of schools on whether we should look at some of new schools being competition instead of tender. I mean, in terms of our profession, what do you think of competitions in general?
Okay, I can talk reasonably intelligently about that question, not through personal experience, but Walters and Cohen, who are KwaZulu-Natal graduates, about 50% of their work is in the education sector, and about 90% of their procurement is through invited competitions. So it's common, so they build schools through competitions, invited competitions. So not, they will select 4 or 5 or sometimes 10 people who will then do a selection process through to doing. So I think it's a fantastic idea. I mean, I absolutely love concept, and funnily enough, it's not that difficult to do for a relatively small investment, particularly where you're doing lots of schools. So they've done a model school and all of these things, and going to I think it would be and just because our budgets are not the same as the budget for schools in the UK, doesn't make it any less valid as a procurement method, in particular for schools, but for other state buildings as well. So and not only if could it potentially help with transformation, but it will give an outcome of if it's organized properly and the judges are not getting kickbacks. I did try sending Sir David $100 just before the judging of the competition, but we couldn't find his address. So if the judges are not getting kickbacks or anything, then you know, obviously it's a fantastic procurement method.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that we will be talking with education and public works about. I think it'll give people, like you're saying, I mean, opportunity to, I mean, it'll give government as well the opportunity to choose the best scheme that is, you know, that can be implemented. Ivor, then Miguel or Adima.
Morning, Dean. Firstly, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm intrigued by your use of timber as the markers for each of the memorials. What about the longevity of it, and what made you choose timber as the element in the context of that?
Either the initial, we did an internal competition, and the initial concept was to do the poles in stainless steel. I felt the one evening we had just started, I was thinking about it, and I just felt that if you look back to our kind of, I mean, I don't know if these metaphors are correct or appropriate, but stainless steel is a Eurocentric material and timber is an African material. That might be overly literal, but that's how it felt to me. The one is quite cold, so the timber kind of felt it had an Africanness to it that stainless steel would lack. So that has created problems for us, obviously, because of durability. And, you know, we're looking at using Iroko, but then there are problems because that's category 6 CITES or whatever. And even though you can get a certificate for it. So I don't really care in our approach to architecture. Has never been, and if I can touch on Skura's comment about the last thing that made me famous, which was my opening roof. I haven't been on top billing since then. So I'm still waiting for them to call. So we've never shy away from challenges. So obviously it's created a challenge because of durability and sustainability and all of that stuff. But we felt it was the right material, the appropriate material for what this particular memorial was.
I can understand that, and I agree with you. I'd just like to add into the debate that you had with Skura regarding competitions. I think the other criteria, which is critically important, and Skura is important that when talking to government about it, is that the quality of the judging is critically important to any competition. So as much as as Dean has said, the brief is critical to any good architectural outcome, because unless you have a good brief, you can't really produce good architecture without rational reasons. But in a competition, particularly, it's the quality of the judges that becomes a critical factor. Thanks, Skura. Thanks, Dean. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Ivan.
Thanks, Ivan. Adima? Then Mark? You're muted. You're muted. Yeah, it's still muted. Try again. Oh, that's a pity. It shows muted this side, Adima.
Skura, shall we try Mark first?
Yeah, let's try Mark solo.
Yeah.
Let me know.
Morning,
Dean, well
Mark.
done. Hello, Skura.
Hello, Mark.
Dean, quick question.
What are those gray hairs in your beard? Was that coming from practice? Now you know what it's like.
They just took a long time to come out after my time with you. Dean, in the Vietnam Memorial, you alluded to the Vietnam Memorial, which is obviously linear. They have like the positioning of the names is related to the time and to the years of the war. Was there any, because I saw in the plan, I thought initially that the posts were evenly spaced, but then in your plan, it looks like they're in groupings. And I was just wondering if there was significance for the overall positioning of how, you know, how the names got laid out. And then also if there was something about the groupings that was considered.
So no, they're primarily only 2 or 3 core involved. I'm embarrassed to admit that I can't remember the name. There is a memorial for Black soldiers who died when a ship sank. No one remember? No, Mike Stoffer.
Mendy.
Yes, the Mendy has a memorial.
Yeah.
Thank you, Skura. But there were a couple of, it was a labor corps and whatever, so there isn't a big difference. The gaps are because if you looked at, there are flat markers without a post where we have a light.
Yeah, I saw that.
And that was for, part of the brief was to be able to, if they found future records of other Black soldiers who had died, they would have capacity to expand the memorial, which was challenging because of our concept. So having a light there that effectively, when you found another victim, the light went out. There's some, you know how literal and basic I am, Mark. Can't like do that fancy theoretical stuff. Then you put a pole there, you know. So I think it's from Survivor, that great architectural show. So and actually how they arrange the things. In fact, Matt is engaging with the Commonwealth Commission currently to look within the context of ours how the grouping is, but it was fairly random. We've got some benches, or not benches, but those blocks to sit on if you want to sit and contemplate. There needs must, the architectural minimalism of the benches has got more to do with the fact that the park is populated with indigent people. So in the spirit of humanity and socialism, of making their life as uncomfortable as possible, we thought we'd keep up with that trend with a rectangular block of granite. Anyway, sure.
Good, thanks, Dean.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Dean. Dean, this is gonna put you a bit on the spot. What's your take on the homeless in terms of our designs of landscapes and everything? Do you consider that people could actually sleep or partly live there? And what's your take generally on how architects should anticipate the fact that there are homeless people in the city?
So, Skira, I'll try and answer that for you. Generally, my attitude towards architects' well-meaning desire, we are a profession that frequently, this is just my opinion, by the way, you can all disagree with me, as I'm sure most of you will, is that our primary duty of care is towards architecture. So I think too many, particularly when I'm marking student schemes, there's this emphasis about our ability to change society, which is somewhat delusional in my opinion. So whilst when designing this thing, you have to be cognizant of the fact that people sleep there, which is why I showed that picture, and that people may need firewood. I mean, that as funny as it is, it's a reality. It's not funny for them. So whilst you have to be cognizant, there is no attempt of our scheme, and nor is a general approach to architecture, do I look to improve the world. I think I'm quite good, but I'm not that good, that I can fix the world. I'll leave that up to other people that have chosen that as their path to do. So I think the greatest thing as architects we can do is make durable buildings that are delightful. I mean, commodity firmness and delight. And, you know, maybe some of those indigent people will look at this and go, sure, this is quite a cool, what is this thing? It's cool. And maybe that'll lift their spirits for a minute, as just before they lift their own spirits. So I don't mean to be flippant, Skira, but I don't know if I'm answering your question. I kind of, you know, there's too many social wrongs and all the rest of it. I mean, although it's an oxymoron, I'm violently anti-war. So my personal crusade is that we shouldn't have war, and yet we've done a war memorial. So war is the most stupid thing that man does, that kills people, that is avoidable. If you mention to a group of people that we should pay attention to the ending of war, people they look at you as if you're a bit nuts or something. And you know and they say frequently comments, but you can't end war, that's ridiculous, that's like part of what man does. But it isn't even in the narrative. We talk about so many other things and injustices and whatever, but I reckon the war and the impact of war is one of the greatest things that I hope that people will just think about. And think about when Wally Peters was teaching being green and eco-friendly and all the rest of it, we all thought he was no, did I say Wally Peters? Sorry, Wally.
Rodney.
Derek Wang.
Oh,
man. He didn't used to bath or something because soap was bad for the environment, and we all gave him, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it was something like that. And we all thought he was a complete nutcase. And now, you know, the whole green movement is suddenly popular and trendy and whatever. I feel that if people had the same mind shift in terms of war, we could do a lot to diminish war. Just as a matter of interest, the carbon footprint of war is quite big. So, but I'm not going to go tie myself to a post outside the Houses of Parliament, even though I look a bit like Greta Thunberg. Okay.
Well, thank you, Dean. Doing a memorial is part of healing the effects of war, I guess. So
yes, that's a valid.
It still means you're anti-war. That's good.
Yeah.
I don't know if Adima, you could try now. I wonder what happened there. I think the whole computer is mute somehow. Any other comment, or maybe you can just type it, Adima? Any other comment or question, please?
She has typed it.
Yeah, Skur, I don't know if you can hear me, but Adima has typed in the chat. Should I read the question? Can you see it, Dean?
Okay.
Your team can read it to you.
Okay. Thanks, Dina.
And as this contrast is, I suppose, it's not actually a question. So note the comment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Acknowledging public access to the memorial space in a space as layered and complex as a company gardens, thinking too about the contrast in scale, the motherload of grandiose war memorials that I have experienced in Washington, D.C.
Okay, I'll try and
yeah.
I'll try and answer the question. I think we do acknowledge public access to the memorial. I think maybe certainly we don't anticipate that our memorial will draw the massive numbers of people that perhaps the Vietnam War Memorial would. And we do deliberately contrast and scale to grand war memorials. That's exactly what we're trying to avoid, is that it is a subtle, understated place of memory and contemplation rather than celebration. That's a very deliberate part of what it is. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah.
And then if I can, I'm looking, I saw another question. Sorry, Dina, the resin impregnated timber, although firing squads have been disallowed, if you mention that in my office, you'd be shot. Sorry. we would definitely, it has to be real timber. And don't ask me why.
Yeah. Dean, this is also a good example of how we can bring architecture to society in general, because somebody passing through the memorial may not understand what's happening. And then suddenly it's in the local press, or suddenly it's on TV. Somebody is speaking about it, curates it, what it means. And then people realize, oh, there's a meaning behind it. So in that way, it's a way of educating people about architecture, and people can then realize it's much more interactive than just pose in a landscape. Monique?
Hi, Dean. Thanks for a great presentation. Your sense of humor, your dry sense of humor always comes through. It's always appreciated. A wonderful presentation, and I think a well-deserved win. I just wanted to ask you, and I was interested to hear that you said that the positioning of the polls was quite random. I think Mark asked about it as well. When I look at it, what comes to my mind is Braille. And I actually thought that maybe you'd position them either as a groupings or with a Braille sort of code in mind. So yeah, it was just an observation. I think, I mean, yeah, it would be interesting to see if you put words to it, what it would come out at, given that it was a whole random exercise ultimately.
You saw, Monique, you saw right through us. It actually says, if you look at if you can do Braille, it says Dean J Architects 555-678. Give us a call for all your architectural needs.
A good one. Thank you.
So, sorry.
But there is opportunity, I guess, Dean, to make the memorial speak, I guess, to the hearing impaired and the visually impaired people.
So sorry, Skira, that I just, in terms of, and apologies, Monique, but you know what I'm like. There is, jokes aside, there will be Braille and accommodation of all of the, quite how that's going to work, we don't know, but it isn't actually to do with the post. So there will be, as part of our client brief, on the podium, means for the visually and hearing impaired to experience the thing. And I mean the main ramp providing accessibility for disabled people and so on and so forth. So consideration of those people will be given in the memorial, but it isn't, what I'm trying to say is it isn't a fundamental part of the design. The polls don't actually spell something out.
Okay, thank you, Dean. Is there any other comments or question, everyone? I think everyone is good. I did ask Dean to share his other work other than the competition. I think he was concerned to give off his competitive edge. Thank you so much, Dean. I think that was a very rich and well-deserving entry, and well done to you. And I think the reason we are having a conversation like that about it is because there's so much to it. And so thank you so much for sharing your work. What's your parting shots on it?
I just thank you all, and yeah, it's I do still love this profession after all these years, and I'd just like to thank Janet in my office for putting the presentation together.
Yeah.
So, and I look forward to the next breakfast talk.
Lovely. Okay. Thank you, Dean.
On that note, Dean, I'd like to say congratulations to your whole office. Obviously, you've drawn a lot on them and their vote of what they think is important, and that is partly why you won, because you had a team who actually worked with you on it. Well done to the whole office.
Yeah.
100%. Thank you, Ava.
Thank you, everyone.